Next on Newsmax Prime. Those aren't fireworks falling on ISIS, but how much damage did this July 4th air attack actually cause, or was it more for political damage control here at home? Then, yet another extension of the deadline for that nuclear deal with Iran. Will the U.S. endure any humiliation to get an agreement? Plus, the rise of the Donald in the GOP and Bernie Mintum among the Dems. Pollster John Zogby takes a look at the numbers in the presidential race. And Newsmax Prime starts now. Good evening and welcome to the Monday edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, the continuing nuclear talks with Iran. But first, Independence Day air attacks. The U.S. and its allies take aim at ISIS in Syria in an effort to help Kurdish forces on the ground. A military spokesman said in all, there were 16 airstrikes, one of the largest deliberate engagements the U.S. has conducted in the battle against the terror group, destroying ISIS-controlled buildings and transit routes. Now, earlier today, President Obama traveled to the Pentagon for a briefing on the war against ISIS. Afterwards, he had this to say.
In order for us to succeed long-term in this fight against ISIL, we have to develop local security forces that can sustain progress. It is not enough for us to simply send in American troops to temporarily set back organizations like ISIL, but to then, as soon as we leave, see that void filled once again with extremists. It is going to be vital for us to make sure that we are preparing the kinds of local ground forces and security forces with our partners that can not only succeed against ISIL, but then sustain in terms of security and in terms of governance.
Joining us now, the former director of both the National Security Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency, General Michael Hayden. He's checking in from Newsmax Washington. Likewise at Newsmax DC, Colonel Derek Harvey, director of the Global Initiative on Civil Society and Conflict and a former intelligence officer in the United States Army. General, to you first. The president said part of defeating ISIS is going after their leaders. Based on the air attacks July 4th, were we after their leaders?
It looked more to me, JD, like we were after their infrastructure, and that's a good thing. I can't rule out that we had some exquisite level of intelligence on leadership, but these looked more like fixed targets that we had in our sights for a while and then made the decision to degrade the capacity of ISIS to do evil, and also, and I think this is really important, JD, to rip away from them this narrative that they're unstoppable and invincible. So in that sense, I think it was a good thing. Now, 16, 18, a couple of dozen, that's not a very big number. And I think we do need to sustain this kind of activity over a much longer period of time.
All right, so the criticism is 16 airstrikes, not a whole lot. Earlier, the term pinprick was used. Was this more than a pinprick, General?
Oh, I think it was. It certainly, relatively speaking, it was more than we have done in the past. I mean, that was the purpose of the Pentagon announcement over the weekend. That's a good trend line. I think we should continue and reinforce that trend line. A good friend of mine, JD, Dave Deptula, retired lieutenant general in the Air Force, was a planner for the Gulf War. Dave has been very frustrated. We've been using air power against ISIS like it's one of those fine Irish mists rather than a thunderstorm. Dave says we need thunderstorms.
Let me turn to Colonel Harvey. And Derek, you take a look at this. I got to tell you, when I first heard about the attacks, I welcomed them, but my suspicion was it was more for political consumption here at home. Can you do anything to assuage those concerns?
Well, I can't at this point. The timing, 4th of July weekend, but also right before the president was going to be going to the Pentagon, it does appear to be some degree of showmanship on one level, but it also illustrates, in my view, that, just like General Hayden said, we're not really putting a lot of resources and effort into the various lines of operation, be it the airstrikes. It's nice to see 16 hit Raqqa, but it's not very much. It should be sustained over the long haul. It's the same thing for the foreign fighter flow, going after finances and other interagency lines of operation. They're not well resourced. They haven't been prioritized. They're not well executed.
The president this afternoon goes to the Pentagon for that briefing. Derek, you made mention of it. Did we hear anything there from our commander-in-chief that was new, or did he repeat previous points of concern?
He highlighted the same things that have been said over the last 9 months, that this is going to be a generational struggle, that we're going to have to depend upon building local forces to achieve these results, that we're going to continue to ask for the removal of Assad in Syria, but there was really nothing new, nothing about new authorities, ramping up capabilities, invigorating the train and equip mission, which is absolutely essential, or really doing a lot differently to build the political way forward to bring Sunni Arabs into the fight. Nothing new.
Well, both of you gentlemen well-versed in intelligence. Mike Hayden, you know Capitol Hill, you know Foggy Bottom, obviously you know the Pentagon. Do you think we're going to hear from anyone within the command structure or somebody at the Pentagon continued frustration with the president failing to move forward with more significant airstrikes and a more significant attack on ISIS?
Well, JD, we're sure to hear about that. Sounds like that coming out of Capitol Hill. I think it'll be less frequent out of the uniformed military. We've got a very powerful and a good tradition of civilian control. But I think I can assure you, JD, that the members of the armed forces are frustrated. That they feel as if their presence in Iraq and Syria is under-resourced and over-regulated. And they would like to see a bit more resources added, not maneuver brigades in the desert, and they'd like more freedom of action to do the kinds of things that the forces that are already there are more capable of doing.
Let us turn our attention now from what is going on with ISIS to the continuing negotiations with Iran. Gentlemen, one of the big sticking points has to do with inspections. We want short notice and easy inspections, but Iran wants to limit those inspections and give the Russians or the Chinese power to veto an inspection request. At the very least, that sounds suspicious, does it not, Derek?
It's absolutely critical that we have unfettered short notice access for inspections. I do not see how this can really work and be effective unless we have that. Technical means will not be sufficient, and if we have to provide evidence as to why we suspect a site, it will be compromised when we put it into the system dealing with the Russians, the Chinese, and also getting into negotiations with Iran about what the basis is for asking for this inspection. It's not going to work.
Got to ask you this, General Mike Hayden. Today, Iran comes out saying it wants an end to the arms embargo as part of the deal. Do you think the administration and our allies will go along with that?
I certainly hope not, JD, but it's worse than that. We have an extensive sanctions regime against the Iranians, some of it because of their nuclear program, some of it to degrade their conventional capacity, others of it because of their support to terrorism. I would very much like us to shred out those current sanctions that apply to their nuclear program and only be discussing those with the Iranians. And by the way, I agree totally with Derek. We can't verify this agreement with tactical means alone.
We'll have to end it there. General Michael Hayden and Colonel Derek Harvey, you have our thanks. When we come back, Donald Trump under attack from within the GOP. As he continues to rise in the polls, some other candidates in the race for the Republican nomination seem to be ganging up on him. What will this mean for party unity in 2016? Then, Hillary Clinton tries to rope in the press, but she cannot fence in Bernie Sanders. We'll take a closer look at the rise of the Vermont senator. Plus, in the birthplace of democracy, Greek voters cast their ballots and say no to more austerity. Is this the end of the EU, and what does this mean for the USA? That and more when Newsmax Prime continues.